Hello, boys and girls. In this lesson, we can convert rational numbers by applying the given rules. Let's begin with the first question. How can you describe these models using a fraction, decimal, and percent? Let's begin with our first square. If we look at the first square, we will notice that there are 25 highlighted boxes out of 100 boxes. So as a fraction, we can write 25 out of 100. As a decimal, we would convert the decimal as 25 hundredths as we read the number 25 over 100, and 25 hundredths as a decimal is 0.25. As a percent, 25% of the square is highlighted. In the square to the right, as a fraction, we can write it as 1 over 4. As a decimal, when we remember to divide the denominator into the numerator, we would get 0.25. As a percent, we would also have 25%. Both these models are equivalent because they both take up the same amount of area. The shaded part takes the same amount of area in each of the squares. So let's write each of these decimals as a percent. How do we do this? First, let's remember that the word percent means for every 100. So to change any number to a percent, we would multiply by 100. Let's use a shortcut method though. In order to multiply any number by 100, a shortcut to that is to move the decimal place 2 times to the right. So to change a decimal into a percent, move the decimal 2 places to the right. Let's try these out. Our decimal point in the first one is located between 0 and 1. When we move our decimal point 2 places to the right, we get the number 14. Therefore, 14 hundredths is equal to 14%. If we do the same to the next one, we would have 43.7% by moving the decimal point 2 places to the right. Again, in the next one, we would move our decimal point 2 places to the right. We have an empty loop that we will fill in with a 0. Therefore, our final answer would be 20%. In our final question, 3.2, if we move our decimal places 2 places to the right and fill in our loop, we would have 320%. This makes sense because if we have 3 wholes, and 3 wholes times 100 gives us 300. Therefore, we know our percentage is greater than a whole or greater than 100%. Now next, in order to write a percent as a decimal, we would just reverse the order of our steps in the previous slide. So when you have a percent that you want to change into a decimal, we would be dividing by 100, or the shortcut is to move the decimal 2 places left. Again, we would move the decimal 2 places to the left. So in the first one, our decimal point in 81 would be at the end. So we would move 2 places to the left to give us the decimal 0.81. For 6%, again, our decimal is found at the end. So we would move our decimal point 2 places to the left. And yes, you've guessed it, we need to fill in our loop with a 0. Therefore, our answer would be 0.06. In 7 and 85 hundredths%, we find the decimal between the 7 and the 8 and would therefore take it and move it 2 places to the left, fill the empty loop with a 0 so that you get 0.0785. In the last one, we find our decimal point at the end. Remember that if there is no decimal point, it would be at the end. Just like if that represented $405, our decimal point would be found at the end of that. So in 405%, with the decimal point after the whole number 5, we would move our decimal point 2 places to the left to give us a decimal number of 4.05. And again, this makes sense because our percentage is more than 100%, which would give us a whole number greater than 1. Moving on to the next slide, we are being asked to change each fraction to a decimal, and then change the decimal to a percent. Remember, to change a fraction to a decimal, we divide the numerator by the denominator. So in the first one, we would do 2 divided by 10 into our calculators and get 0.2 as a decimal. To change that into a percent, we know we will be moving our decimal place over 2 places to the right, filling in our loop, getting 20%. In the next question, again, we would be dividing our numerator by our denominator, and using a calculator, we will find that it equals 0.24. When we take 0.24 and move our decimal point to the right 2 times, we will find that 6/25 is equal to 24%. When we do the same steps in our last problem, we will find that we have a repeating decimal. When we have a repeating decimal, when we move our decimal point 2 places to the right, knowing that the next number after this 4 would be a 4, we would then continue by writing a 4. Therefore, you would have 44.4% with now the bar over that last 4.